Next podcast with Chris and Todd.
All right, so hey, we're back to Next Podcast. This is the Next Podcast with Todd and Chris.
Yeah, very creative name we've come up with.
Next,
And, yeah,
what's next?
gives us a lot of freedom to go wherever with
Explore the space.
We're
if you will.
exploring. We are exploring.
I was watching a movie clip. Didn't see that one coming, did you? Nope, you didn't. It's such a great clip. You're like, oh yeah. That pretty much is my life. Didn't see that coming, did you, Rachel? Nope. And that's pretty much what I've grown to expect from you, Chris. So thanks a lot. So
That's good.
Listen, I like keeping her on her toes.
Yeah. And keeping the humor, just making fun of yourself constantly.
Absolutely. It just kind of works. A little self-deprecation never hurt anybody.
Keep you humble.
That's right. Oh man. So we're just diving into these ideas of next and what that looks like. Not next. But next, see, I can't.
NEXT.
I feel like my sinuses aren't helping me do the NEXT today. Yeah. But next,
there you
podcast.
go.
There you go.
Let's sound that out.
All right.
We've been focusing these last few ones on just kind of how to do something, kind of taking your next steps in those areas. And I think our focus will be today on forgiveness.
I forgive you, Todd.
Oh well, thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate
I don't know
that.
what for yet, but
I take that forgiveness,
it's
and I want you to know I receive it.
I appreciate your appreciation. Mm-hmm. No,
I echo that echo.
Yeah. This is a hard one, right? Like, we all deal with moments where forgiveness is at some point gonna come up, like our willingness to, our unwillingness to, the necessity of it. And I think so often we try to navigate life trying to, I don't know if it's true or not, but it feels like we try to navigate life as simple as possible without having to do things that really are going to stretch us or put us in an uncomfortable position and leave us in a place of, well, I'll just chalk it up to life, rather than stop and go, okay, something hit different there that I've got to deal with or I've got to reckon with now. And you have to make the choice that you're going to do it or not. And forgiveness is definitely one of those things.
I think as I think through it, I don't know when I was taught this, but it felt like forgiveness was, oh, that's pain. Maybe I'm just overreacting. Maybe I'm too sensitive. Yeah. Let me just kind of shove that down and not deal with it or avoid it, because that would just, I don't want to create more issues with somebody.
Sure.
You know, those kind of things. And forgiveness is hard. I mean, when you grow up, if you have siblings, like you need to say sorry to your brother.
I'm sure that my sister has a long list of moments where I did not do forgiveness well. And she is like, I remember back in 86, not long after I became conscious of you're a jerk. No. But I remember Doug and Susie being like, you need to forgive, or you need to ask for forgiveness, and really putting that out there for me to be like, this is something you have to be conscious of. You hurt them, or yes, they may have hurt you. And sometimes if I remember correctly, and I believe I do, I appreciate my mom and dad doing this. Like, sometimes they're not going to say it, and you're going to have to just be okay. You may never hear, I'm sorry. And that, I know that has wrecked many of people, because we feel like that is owed to us. We feel like it's got to be said before we can even begin to move on or even think of that person in a way that would be healthy. Yeah. And I know we're kind of maybe all over the map, but I think that proves true that when it comes to forgiveness, there are so many emotions and so many feelings that get stirred up. Whether you were taught, like what we said at the beginning, say you're sorry, say forgive them, ask for forgiveness, whatever the case is, because of what you did. Some of us, it was never a term ever uttered, and you're like, well, it is what it is, so chalk that one up to life. Or you feel those emotions like you were talking about, where you're going, something feels right, like I should do something here, but I don't know if I want to or even how to begin to engage it.
Well, I also felt like just saying sorry was like, you're like, okay, we're putting a Band-Aid over a massive wound.
Let's just move on.
Yeah, move on. So I think as we get older, especially as adults and even teenagers too, depends on what you've walked through in your life. Like at some point in your life, forgiveness is going to become a huge part of how you navigate life. Yeah. Because pain's going to come.
It is.
Whether it's from things you don't achieve or it's people or whatever. Life doesn't go the way you want it to. We're all working through forgiveness in those moments.
Yeah. It really, the more I talk to people, the more I find that to be true. The area of forgiveness or moments missed that could have freed someone or catapulted them to the next level are missing because there wasn't a healthy resolution. And I think that's ultimately the key, right? Like we want resolution. You can say justice, you can say whatever, you can say a lot of words there, but I want them to feel the pain. Anyway, but the resolution of forgiveness, of coming to a place where it's mutual. And there's a lot of that floating around where that is not happening.
Yeah. And I think with this, like how to forgive, I think there's some things that you and I will cover that will help you kind of begin to go, am I doing this in a healthy way? Am I doing this in the way that God desires? Because I do think there's some important truths to know when it comes to forgiveness. One of the first places I would start, because you even alluded to it, is we all have this desire to see things reconciled. Yep. Especially when we've been the one that's hurt. We want to see it reconciled. We want to see it, hey, that person should notice my pain, should be sorry, and we should be able to make it better and be able to make it healthier. Yeah,
because nothing's worse than somebody not being aware that they hurt you, right? Like, at least that's the feeling.
Correct. And so with that, we desire reconciliation, but sometimes we will skip this first step, which is forgiveness. And that's where the two separate a little bit. Reconciliation is that part to where both parties work to resolve it. They forgive each other, and now they're working towards a better and healthy relationship. In a marriage, that's how it should work. We are reconciling things. We are staying.
How it should work.
Like, I say it that way because I get it.
Yeah.
There's some who don't want to pursue reconciliation, but forgiveness is that first step.
Yep, absolutely.
And forgiveness is this huge part, and to help define it and make sure we're all on the same page, forgiveness is not always reconciliation. It's the first step to reconciliation. Yeah. Forgiveness is saying, I'm letting go of the pain that was caused to me. Yep. And best way I describe it is, if you're not careful, you will let the pains and what people have done, the circumstances, all that, occupy your mind. Yep. Occupy your heart and give it real estate that it should not have in your heart and mind. You have to learn to fight it. It's not like it's just going to go away. Yep. But this is you going, no, I've forgiven that. And forgiveness is not a one-time thing. It's an ongoing thing.
Yeah. That idea of who's driving the car, right? And if unforgiveness is driving the car, it's going to steer you down avenues. It's going to steer you away from things that would ultimately bring healthy resolve to stuff. But man, again, we don't want to do hard things, but if we're going to navigate life well, which I think is essential, I think it's so essential. Valuable. Marriage, like you alluded to marriage, friendships, even working relationships, all those, even your kids. Like one of the things that Rachel and I focused on really early and often, was it's great to share the good things you do with kids. Like, hey, dad did this today. And, mom did that. She's amazing. And not sharing the places where we messed up. And sometimes that is unforgiveness. Like, dad should have forgiven them. Dad should have done this. And unforgiveness isn't sexy. Like it's not, it's like you're saying, it's allowing something to take up rent in your life and in your heart that is only damaging what's there and keeping you from really experiencing healthy relationship and emotions that have to be there if you're going to walk out life.
And I want to be careful with this, because I do think if we walk out forgiveness, it can heal a lot of those wounds in our lives. Is it everything? There's layers to everything. Yeah, yep. But I go, prime example I've seen, and this is adults all the way down to teenagers, because I've done student ministry, I've done adult ministry for a long time. But both of them, I'd go, when there is usually specific pain, apparent pain. Yep. And by that, they're going, Why did my mom, dad abandon me? Why are they not around? What happened to them? Especially to those kids maybe who've been adopted into another family, or dad left, mom left, whatever the case may be. The issues that can, if you don't forgive, the abandonment issues you'll deal with, the I'm not good enough, I'm not whatever, I'm not lovable, all those things can really creep up and start to take hold when they're not true. Yeah. And everybody else would be like, that's not true about you. Yeah. But for you, you're still working through that forgiveness, because those, I'll call them evil things, those pains have it to where they will latch on to things and try to destroy it, try to take it apart. Yeah. Because it's like, hey, where's your identity? Well, I believe I'm worth loving. I believe I'm good. But then these things happen and that gets attacked. Yeah. And if you don't walk through forgiveness, you will settle for this and you think you're fine. And this is the danger of thinking you're fine, but you'll see yourself get really, and these are the telltale signs to me. Yeah. You get anger really quickly. You're very insecure about things. And in these just situations, you're like, oh, you assume the worst about the other person. Yeah. And you project some of the pains that you've had onto, oh, they did that. That triggered me on everything. And I'm like, whoa. This is like, I'm not saying those things go away, but you working through forgiveness, letting go of those things, that's part of the work you've got to do. Yeah, I would say one of the things you mentioned a couple. One of the other ones is avoiding. You avoid them in the office. You avoid them in the home, and the danger in that is that, as you said, it only builds up more. And the enemy wants that. The enemy, it says don't give him a foothold. And one of the analogies I use all the time is like, I'm not a good rock climber. This body, not a good rock climber. Okay, but it, like a good rock climber only needs like almost a quarter of an inch or less. And if the enemy is the best at trying to get at us, how much less does he need? And he just needs that crack, that little window to begin to wedge all those things in there. If we're going to begin to do that, simple, small steps, and these are small practices with your kids, with your spouse. Hey, I'm sorry. If we are unable to say, hey, I'm sorry, please forgive me, we're never going to be able to take on the bigger things. Like, hey, I locked my keys in my car again. I'm sorry. That you're like, well, that really isn't a big deal. But if we're unwilling to say, I'm sorry for small things, man, how much more dangerous is it going to be when the big things come and we're not willing to utter those words? Oh, it's what God says, if you're faithful in the little things. So, and I'm not saying like, okay, so if I say sorry in the small things, God's going to give me bigger things to say sorry. No. Light them up. But I think he's just prepping you, I think, for what could happen in life. Yeah. And I think regardless, there's always going to be a moment, and I think this is working this out even with God, where you're going to be like, God, this is not going the way I thought it would. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm really frustrated actually with you. Yeah. And learning to process through forgiving, like, hold on, God is still good. I've got to let go of that thought. I've got to let go of some of that mindset that I have. Mm-hmm. And it's working through. It's not like it's just going to go away tomorrow, but it's going like, wait a minute. Even if I disagree with what God did or what God is allowing, is he still good? And I would say yes. So there you go. Now you're working through forgiveness. I think forgiveness is what it helps you is to actually go back to wait, what is the truth? Yeah. And because if you don't, and you don't forgive, you'll start believing lies that are taking your life down the wrong road. Yeah. No, and I think because you and I deal with this one as well, as when people come to the realization that other person may never say anything and they've got to step up and say, okay, hey, I forgive you for what you've done. And forgiveness will just, again, hold you hostage and will wreck any chance. Good phrase there. Of you moving forward. And the beautiful part of them, you coming to the place of saying, this is me. This has got to be me. That's got to take this step because I've experienced the forgiveness of Jesus. And we could talk about that for a long time, right? Like we ultimately have to forgive because Jesus has forgiven us so much. And that's a tough one because people will say, and I've heard it said a number of times, well, Jesus has to forgive or he had to forgive. No, he didn't.
He's willingly chose, and I was reading that in my devotions the other day that, like the Heavenly Father turned his back on his son because of the sin that was on the cross, and that turning of the back and allowing Jesus to be the price of that sacrifice for us was so powerful. And so forgiving what we have done and what we will do, and allowing us to experience freedom. And that's ultimately what this forgiveness and working through this is to get to freedom and to not have those things that are roadblocks for us to live life the way he intended us to live.
I think there you go. You bring up, we got to follow Jesus' example in this. And I'd say God's example. He forgives us over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And on top of that, he forgives regardless if reconciliation is going to happen.
Yeah.
He wants it to happen. He wants everybody to come to him, but he also understands, I've forgiven you, but when are we going to talk about this stuff? When are we going to work through this? When are we going to make the changes that would make this relationship healthier? Yeah. And if you don't want that, then we can't reconcile things.
Yeah.
But I've still forgiven you. So that's the part for me. I have to go back to God did that with me. He forgave me before I was ever ready to reconcile things. And he also keeps forgiving me even now, even when our relationship is good, I still make mistakes, and he keeps forgiving me and keeps going, hey, let's reconcile that. He set the example in this, and you are absolutely correct. He chose to do this. Yeah. He did not force himself. Yeah. He did not. This is just the character of who he is. And he's going, can I show you how to put that in your heart? Yeah. Because Satan, this world will try to tell you a different narrative, a different story to go after. And I'm telling you, there can be, I want to be careful with this phrase, but hopefully you'll understand it. There can be a lot of pain that can be healed, and somewhat even more pain avoided when you walk through this process. And I can say that because my story has been some of that. Like, I have forgiven people, and I can look back in the moments and go, I would not want to relive that again, but I'm glad I walked through it because it taught me how to forgive and making sure that my identity and the things I'm reconciling are in the right place. Yeah.
No, I appreciate what you said there, because I think it is important, like the healing that can take place. Because Rachel and I's relationship is not a sum of all the times that I've hurt her. It's the moments. And I'll be honest, there are probably times that I missed moments where I should have stepped in and said, I'm sorry, that was on me. That's on me. But it's in those moments I can look back where we did have those conversations. And I'm thankful that she doesn't just pull out a book every time I have a conversation like, oh man, you remember back in January of 2020? You were a doozy that day. Okay. I'm just saying.
That's funny.
And so it's best modeled in that marriage relationship for me, like, because that's the relationship that Jesus has entrusted me with. And he forgives me, and my spouse forgives me, and I do forgiving as well. I mean, but Rachel's so much better than I am. Let's just be honest at this point. The reality of healing that takes place when you know that you're going the same direction and you're forgiven, and that it's not held over you anymore, or you don't have to carry that anymore, is so powerful. And it begins to give you different insight and perspective in the way that ultimately you should be treating other people and forgiving other people. And man, what an awesome opportunity for us to learn. And maybe it is beginning to practice those small steps of, hey, will you please forgive me for this? Or, hey, I am sorry for the way that I acted. Listen, you've got to familiarize yourself with those phrases, because ultimately, like we talked about, God, I'm sorry. I have been acting only thinking about myself. I have been trying all this. I want your forgiveness. I want your love to be evident. And to me, that's where it goes to. Forgiveness leads to peace, which leads to love. And our love for others is a marker of the way that we show a world around us that we love him.
Yeah, the best way to understand forgiveness is you got to understand how much God's forgiven you. Most people who struggle with forgiveness is because the way they see themselves in God is probably not accurate.
Yeah.
Because I've been there. Like, if you're trying to earn God's love, forgiveness is going to be a hard conversation, because you're demanding perfection from yourself. Like I've got to make it up to God. I've got to do that. And you see that won't work when you mess it up. You just fall apart because you're going, I can't forgive. And I would say the other part to this is you and your God. But if you can't forgive yourself, you will always be stuck with forgiveness.
Yeah.
Because you may go, okay, I know God's forgiven me. I know this person's forgiven me, and I've forgiven them, but I can't believe I did that.
Yep.
Or I can't believe I'm this horrible of a person. And you look in the mirror and you can't forgive who you see in the mirror. You're gonna that's when God says, love God, love others as you love yourself.
Yep.
I think forgiveness kind of falls right in line with that. Like how you forgive God, how you forgive others, and how you forgive yourself, all are connected.
And just because I had a conversation not long ago with someone, this idea of like, I've asked for forgiveness, and the enemy will remind you of that. But how much more powerful to not live with that weight of like, listen, God doesn't see you that way anymore. You've asked for forgiveness. You are intentionally living in a way that is trying to honor and glorify Him. You leave it there. Don't drag it with you. Don't put it back in the backpack and, weigh yourself down by it. Allow there to be freedom, because man, you said it early on, freedom comes in forgiveness and forgiving yourself and others.
Sum it up this way: either forgiveness will give you freedom or it will hold you hostage.
Yep.
Those are the options you're going with forgiveness. And if you choose not to forgive, it will become a hostage moment.
Yep.
If you choose to forgive and learn to work through it, because you're not going to get it day one, it is an ongoing process. And the next thing's going to happen. You're going to have to keep practicing and keep practicing.
Yep.
And you have a God who does it with us as humanity every day. So it's not like He's like, good luck. He's like, I'm walking right here with you.
Yep.
And let me show you how to keep forgiving. So,
And no matter where you've been, no matter what you've gone through, we understand it's a process. But please do yourselves a favor. Come to focus in on and ask God, okay, how do I begin to do this? First and foremost, like if you don't have a relationship with Jesus, hey, please forgive me for walking in my own way and desiring to do things on my own, and help me do life your way. That's first and foremost, understanding God's forgiveness. But I understand there are excuses there, and those will keep you in that hostage area. They will keep you in the hostage area. Freedom comes with releasing that, forgiving that, or beginning to not allow it to rule your life. And so we want that for you. And there are great resources. There's good books. Maybe it's even counseling. Maybe it's just a conversation. But don't allow things that could be remedied to continue to hold you at a place where you're not growing and you're not seeing life as it really should be. And so
it's good stuff. And I would just encourage you, go after this forgiveness, because I think you'll find a whole nother side to God and a whole nother part to you that you're like, wow, I think you realize you're stronger than you think, but you also learn how to overcome a lot of things in your life that you're like, that does not have to define me. That pain can shape me, but it does not have to define me.
Which is a tough comment, right? Mm-hmm. That pain can shape me, and it does. And if we're willing, wow.
And that's the part is, like, we go back, either that pain will shape you towards freedom or it will shape you towards being a hostage. And so.
All right. Well, let's move forward. And that, man, that's just the beginning steps of how to forgive, but pray that it's helpful and beneficial to you. And you take that step today. So you guys are awesome. We love you. We'll see you next time.